It all started when I met her at a charity event. I had never been much for parties or high society gatherings, but my family, being what it was, always insisted I show up to these things. I wasn't expecting anything extraordinary that evening, just the usual conversations with people who had their own agendas. But then, I saw her. Angelina was standing by the bar, her laugh catching my attention before anything else. She had this light about her, something that made her stand out even in a crowd of the most beautiful women. Her dark hair cascaded in soft waves down her back, and her eyes, those eyes, were like nothing I had ever seen. There was a fire in them, but it was softened by something else, something warmer. I didn't approach her right away. I wasn't one to rush into things. But as the night went on, fate seemed to pull us together. Our first conversation was simple. She asked about the event, about the charity, about me. Nothing too deep, nothing that made me feel like she had ulterior motives. Yet, there was something different about her. She wasn't asking because she was interested in my wealth. She was genuinely curious. And I was intrigued. We spoke for hours, and by the time the event ended, I was already thinking about her. It wasn't just her beauty, though that was undeniable. It was her energy, her intelligence, the way she listened, the way she spoke. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was someone who could change everything for me. We went on a few more dates after that. Dinner, walks, lazy afternoons spent at art galleries and museums. Slowly, I found myself falling in love with her, not just for the woman she was, but for the way she made me feel alive, like life had purpose beyond just the wealth and expectations that hung over my shoulders. It didn't take long for us to become inseparable. I wanted her in my life, and it seemed she wanted me in hers. We shared our dreams, our fears, our stories. And when she agreed to marry me, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. We were married within the year. The ceremony was small, intimate, only family and close friends. But it was perfect. I looked at her that day, standing at the altar, and knew that my life would never be the same. I had found the person I was supposed to be with. After the wedding, we went on our honeymoon. We spent 2 weeks in a secluded villa in Italy, just the two of us, surrounded by vineyards, olive trees, and the warmth of the Mediterranean sun. I remember every moment of it as if it were yesterday. Her laugh as she ran into the sea, the way she looked at me with a kind of longing, as if she already knew my soul. But I wasn't the only one who had things to offer. In the quiet of our honeymoon, I began to realize that Angelina wasn't just beautiful. She was clever, charming, and incredibly persuasive. We talked about the future, her future, our future. And that was when I first saw the subtle shift in her tone. "I love you, Brad," she said one night, curled up next to me under the stars. "I just want us to have a beautiful life. Together, you and I. Don't you want the same?" Of course I did. But there was something in the way she said it, something that made my heart skip a beat, something that felt a little too rehearsed, a little too perfect. I shrugged it off. Maybe I was just being paranoid. After all, I had everything I wanted. A beautiful wife, a life of comfort, security. But deep down, I couldn't escape the feeling that there was more to the story than she was letting on. Months passed, and our life together continued as we both settled into the rhythm of marriage. But it wasn't long before I began noticing little things, small changes in Angelina that were hard to ignore. She started talking more about what we should do for the future. There was always a hint of something practical in her words, as if she was considering the long-term picture far more than I was used to. She talked about our estate, our wealth, and the future of our family. She wanted a family. I knew that much, but what struck me was the way she spoke about it, like it was a necessity, not a dream. One evening, after a quiet dinner, she turned to me, her face serious. "Brad," she said, her voice soft but determined, "I want to have a child with you. We need to think about our legacy, about ensuring everything we've built together stays safe." I nodded, agreeing without much thought. We were in love. Having children seemed like the next logical step. But as time went on, I began to wonder, was it really about love for her? Or was it about securing something deeper, something tied to the life I had inherited? I started to question things. And yet, every time I brought it up, Angelina would brush it off, assuring me that I was overthinking it. But my heart couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. As the months went by, I began to notice small but significant changes in Angelina. It wasn't anything overt at first, just subtle shifts in the way she spoke about our life, our future. She started bringing up money more often, talking about investments, securing assets, and the long-term stability of our wealth. At first, it felt practical, but there was something about it that felt off. It was almost like she was more focused on security than on us. One evening, after dinner, she looked at me seriously and said, "Brad, we need to think about the future, about our legacy. I want to give our children the life they deserve. We have to be sure everything is in place." I nodded, trying to reassure her, but the words felt too calculated. I wasn't just hearing concern for our family's well-being. I was hearing a plan that seemed to focus on stability, not on love, not on us, but on securing something deeper. The next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She was talking about the future, our future, but it felt more like she was planning her future with me, not us. One night, I overheard her talking to Emily about how important it was to secure our assets. The conversation didn't sit well with me. It wasn't just about love, it was about ensuring her place in my life. I couldn't ignore the unease growing inside me. Was I really the man she loved? Or was I just a means to an end? It was hard to tell anymore. Everything felt less about the future we could build together and more about what I could provide. The revelation didn't hit me all at once. It was more like a slow burn, the kind that starts with a flicker and builds until it consumes everything in its path. It started innocently enough. I was out of town for a few days on business, and when I came home, I found an envelope on the kitchen counter. It was addressed to Angelina, but the handwriting wasn't familiar. Curiosity got the best of me, and before I knew it, I was opening it. The letter inside was from a lawyer's office, a law firm specializing in asset protection. My heart skipped a beat, and I felt a knot tighten in my chest. I skimmed through the contents of the letter, my mind racing. It was all about securing assets, protecting wealth, and preparing for the future of her family. My family. Our family. But the language in the letter wasn't about love or partnership. It was about securing a future that didn't seem to fully include me. Not in the way I thought. It became clear that the plans were hers. The wealth, the future, everything. It was her blueprint, her strategy for ensuring that she and her future children would be taken care of, no matter what happened to me. I wanted to believe that I was overreacting, that this was just a misunderstanding. But deep down, the truth was undeniable. It was as if she had been planning her position in my life long before we even met. I couldn't confront her right away. I needed time to process, to piece it together. But when I finally did, her reaction was nothing short of what I expected. She denied everything, of course. She brushed it off as nothing more than precaution, something everyone does, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I had seen enough, and this time, I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into thinking I was imagining things. I wasn't going to ignore what was right in front of me. I started digging deeper, looking into things that I should have noticed earlier. The way she talked about our future, the way she insisted on having a child, suddenly felt less like a dream and more like an investment. Her words were calculated, her plans methodical. This wasn't just about love anymore. This was about control, about securing her place in a life she hadn't fully built on her own. I knew then, without a shadow of a doubt, that Angelina wasn't just in this for the love. She was in this for the legacy. Her legacy. The revelation hit me harder than I thought it would. I tried to confront her, but she denied everything. She played the victim, pretending to be hurt that I would even think such a thing. But I could see through it now. I had seen enough. Then came the day I found something else. A conversation, recorded on her phone, between her and my best friend, Mark. The conversation was intimate. Not just intimate in the way lovers are, but intimate in a way that shattered everything I thought I knew. Mark, my best friend, the one person I trusted more than anyone else. They weren't just friends. They weren't just colleagues. They were involved. I couldn't breathe when I saw it. I confronted both of them. Mark admitted it. He'd been seeing her, behind my back, for months. He claimed it was just a phase, but I knew it was more than that. And Angelina? She didn't deny it. She didn't even try. She simply said, "Brad, you knew this was about more than just love. This is about security. I needed a way to make sure my future was protected. You've been so blind." The weight of the truth hit me harder than I ever imagined it would. When I confronted Angelina, the words seemed to fall from my mouth with a heaviness I couldn't escape. "I want a divorce." She froze, her eyes wide with disbelief, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of real emotion in her, fear. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the familiar mask of defense and denial. She tried to bargain with me, tried to convince me that everything we had was worth fighting for. "Brad, we can work through this. I love you. I need you," she said, her voice soft, but her eyes avoided mine. There was no sincerity in her words, no real apology. Just the echoes of someone who realized their security was slipping away. My heart ached as I looked at her. I loved her once, or at least I thought I did. But now, all I could feel was betrayal, not just for what she had done, but for the person she had turned out to be. She wasn't the woman I had married. She was a stranger, someone who had used me to get what she wanted. I could feel the sharp sting of my own disillusionment, and it cut deeper than I ever thought possible. How did I not see this sooner? How had I let myself believe that love was enough to hold us together when, all along, it was just a game for her? But there was no going back now. The trust was shattered, and the man I once was, the hopeful, trusting person, was gone. I couldn't live in that lie any longer. When I told her that it was over, the anger that followed was almost unbearable. She didn't fight me in the way I expected, though. She didn't yell or scream. Instead, she turned cold, distant, something I had never seen from her before. It was as if the woman I had fallen in love with was slipping away, and in her place was someone who cared only for her next move. I didn't have the strength to say more. There was nothing left to say. The life we had built, no matter how grand it looked on the outside, was empty. And as I walked out of the room, I felt like I was walking away from a ghost, from a memory of something I had imagined, not something real. The pain didn't come immediately, not until the silence settled in. It wasn't the loss of her I mourned, not anymore. It was the loss of myself, the man who believed in something better. And that asterisk was the hardest part. After I filed for divorce, I thought the worst was behind me, but that was just the beginning. Angelina didn't let go easily. She wasn't going to walk away quietly. She fought me at every turn, her attempts to regain control becoming more desperate as the days passed. At first, it was the phone calls, endless, pleading messages. "Brad, please," she would say, her voice shaking with emotion, though I could hear the manipulation in her tone. "We can fix this. I'll change. I promise. Don't do this." But I couldn't give in, not this time. The reality of what had happened between us had finally settled in, and I knew deep down that nothing would ever be the same again. But then she escalated. It wasn't just words anymore. She hired lawyers, tried to stall the divorce proceedings, making everything drawn out and painful. It was as if she couldn't accept that I was serious, that I was really walking away from her, from the life we had built. One night, after another long day of legal wrangling, she showed up at my house unannounced. I hadn't seen her in weeks, and when she stood on my doorstep, looking so fragile, so broken, I almost let myself feel the familiar ache of empathy. But I had to stop myself. "I'm not here to fight you," she said, her eyes pleading. "I just need you to understand. I never meant to hurt you. Everything I did, it was because I was scared. I was scared of losing it all, of losing you." Her words were a knife in my chest, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. "Angelina, I don't know who you are anymore," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, as the weight of it all pressed on me. "You're not the woman I married. You're not the woman I fell in love with. And I can't keep living this lie. It's over." Her face twisted in frustration. "You think I did this for the money, don't you?" She spat, anger flashing in her eyes. "You think I'm just after your wealth. But that's not it, Brad. It's about more than that. It's about the future. It's about security." Security. The word hit me like a slap across the face. I had thought it was about love, about us building something meaningful, but it was all so much colder than I had ever realized. "I don't want you for your money, Brad. I want you for who you are. For what we can be," she said, her voice wavering. But I couldn't believe her anymore. Her words felt empty, rehearsed. The woman who had promised me everything, who had shown me a side of herself I thought I knew, had been playing a game the whole time. And now, when it was clear that the game was over, she was still fighting to hold on, as if the truth would change. "I'm sorry," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "But there's nothing left to fight for." She looked at me one last time, the anger and desperation in her eyes slowly giving way to something I hadn't expected: resignation. She knew. She knew she couldn't change my mind anymore. As she turned and walked away, I felt a final pang of regret, but it was not for her. It was for the person I had become, the person who had allowed himself to be used, to be blinded by a love that had never truly existed. And as the door clicked shut behind her, I knew I was finally free. The final papers came through. It was done. I was free. Angelina tried to contact me. Calls, messages, letters. But I ignored them all. There was nothing left to say. Nothing left to salvage. I had given her everything. My heart, my trust, my life. And she had taken it all, used it, and thrown it away. The days after I filed for divorce were long, filled with empty silence and the weight of everything I had lost. Angelina did everything she could to hold on to me, from tearful phone calls to late-night visits. But it was clear now that nothing could undo what had been done. The lies, the manipulation, the cold calculation. It all felt like a distant memory now, yet still fresh enough to sting. I saw her once more, the day the divorce papers were finalized. She showed up at my office, looking every bit the woman who had once captured my heart. But her eyes were empty now, devoid of the passion or warmth I had once seen in them. She had no words left to say, just a heavy sigh that seemed to carry the weight of her defeat. "I never thought it would end like this," she whispered, her voice faltering as she stood before me. "I did," I replied, the finality of my words settling over us both. I knew this wasn't real. It was never about us. It was always about what you could take from me. Her eyes glistened with tears, but this time, I didn't reach out. I couldn't. I had already given too much, and now, it was time to let go, for good. There was nothing left to salvage, no version of her I could fall back in love with. The truth had settled too deeply in my soul. She nodded, as if resigned to the fact that the life we had built together was just an illusion. "I thought I could change your mind," she murmured, almost to herself. I shook my head. "No, Angelina. I wanted to believe in you, in us. But I can't keep living in the lies." I handed her the last of her things, items she had left behind during our separation, the final pieces of a life that never truly belonged to us. As she took them, she lingered for a moment, almost as if waiting for me to say something, anything to bring us back to what we once had. But there was nothing left to say, and as she turned and walked away, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. It hurt, yes, but it wasn't the same kind of pain I had felt when I first realized what she was doing. It was a kind of quiet release, the kind you feel when you finally let go of something you've been holding onto for far too long. I knew I was done. I knew that I had to move forward, rebuild, and heal. And no matter how much she fought to keep me, I was no longer the man who could be manipulated by the idea of love. I walked out of my office, into the bright sunlight of a new day, finally free from the weight of it all.
If you like this story and felt connected, please subscribe. Thanks for watching Gaby's cheating stories. See you on the next one.